Hey guys, welcome to another Get Ready With Me Shop My Stash video. Let's just quickly go through the products so that you know what we are dealing with. Starting off with the complexion products, I want to share with you today the First Aid Beauty Hello Fat Bendy Avocado Concealer. I ended up buying the shade Fair because if you guys remember, a couple of weeks ago I shared with you in another Shop My Stash video that I had purchased this concealer based off recommendation of Melissa Gold. I really like the formula and the finish of this. It doesn't dry out my eyes, it has a beautiful natural finish to it, but the shade that I had bought, which is this one, is the shade 03 Light, and this was way too dark for me. Let me just quickly swatch the two of them so that you can clearly see the difference between the two shades. And I like the formula so much, and the concealer was still on sale. I bought the first shade on sale, and I was lucky enough to buy this shade on sale as well. This is the shade 02 Fair. First Aid Beauty has a very strange way of like naming and numbering their shades, but I think this one works really well for me. So here is the shade Fair, here is the shade Light. You can clearly see that the shade Light is more of like a light medium to me, and the shade Fair is more of a light. So I can imagine that the even lighter shade would probably be okay for someone with my skin tone, but like for really fair people, I'm actually not sure. So this shade works really well for me. It has a little bit of like those peachy yellow undertones, and it is light enough to melt well with my skin tone. Another interesting complexion product I want to share with you in this Shop My Stash is the Pat McGrath Labs Skin Fetish Sublime Perfection Foundation. Now, I bought this foundation upon launch without really knowing what shade would work for me, and as a result of that, I unfortunately ended up buying a shade that is way too light for me. I think this is the shade Light 5. I should have probably gone for like Light 7, but at the time I didn't really know that. So when the foundation arrived, I really enjoyed the formula and the finish, but unfortunately the shade was way too light for me. So what I ended up doing is mixing it in with other foundations. But I think I'm about as pale as I can get. It would be great if I can make use of this foundation as it is without having to mix it with other formulas, because I do like the formula as it is. So let's just try today and see whether I am pale enough to be able to pull this off. Okay, moving further into complexion, I have the Butter Bronzer from Physicians Formula. I did use this a couple of weeks ago for another Shop My Stash. I really enjoy this bronzer. I would like to get more use out of it, and you're going to see it quite often featured in this series. Then for blush, I have chosen this really beautiful MAC blush from a limited edition collection a couple of years ago. This was their Nutcracker collection, I want to say 2017, maybe even 2016, I can't be sure. It's the Sweet Vision Magic Dust Powder, and it is a beautiful, basically peachy pink with a gold sheen. I really like the finish of this powder. I think it looks so fresh and luminous on the skin. Then for highlighter, I have chosen an oldie but a goodie. This is a Makeup Geek highlighter in the shade Psychedelic. It is one of their duochrome highlighters, and oh my goodness, when this highlighter was released, I literally couldn't stop using it. I will try to shift it a little bit into the light if you're able to see the gorgeous copper duochrome that this has, and also the relatively large dent I have in this highlighter. I was obsessed with it. I just could not stop wearing it. It's so beautiful. It has a very lightweight, beautiful formula to it. It looks really beautiful on the skin, and I feel like these kind of duochromes really fit my skin tone. For eyeshadow palettes, I have also chosen two throwbacks. This is the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette. Oh my goodness, the Easter egg hunt I had to organize in order to get this palette. It was released in 2016, originally as a limited edition palette. And when at the time I didn't really have any way to get Too Faced in the Netherlands. Coincidentally, I was visiting my parents in Bulgaria in the spring of 2016. I visited the Sephora there, and to my disappointment, the palette hadn't launched there yet. However, they were willing to reserve one for me when it launches. So I sent my parents on a mission to get this palette for me as soon as they get a phone call that it is in stock. This was literally the very last palette they were able to get in the spring of 2016. Of course, the palette came back afterwards, and it wasn't such a big deal to get it anymore, but back when I got it, it was a real Easter egg hunt to get this palette. So I'm going to bust it out today because I actually still like the formulas in here. And the other palette I'm going to use is another throwback. This is the Enchanted Secrets palette from Linda Hallberg. Now, this is a very interesting palette in the sense that it is a bit of a polarizing product for me. I really like the formula on these. I think they're really beautiful, and probably in terms of texture as close as you're going to get to the VR shades from Pat McGrath, although these are much more sheer and much less sparkly. However, they were incredibly expensive and they're housed in the most cheap, lightweight packaging you can ever imagine. Like, the price of this does not reflect the packaging that it is housed in at all. And I understand that the formulation of this is quite expensive, but I think that it is unacceptable to charge 50 euros, which is how much I paid for this, just for a formula. You need to get something better for your packaging. So that's why I'm saying this is a bit of a polarized product for me, because I enjoy it, but at the same time I don't. So let's see what we're going to come up with these two. And then for my lips, I have chosen this Kiko lipstick. This is one of their Gossamer Emotion lipsticks. This is the shade 107, which is kind of like your standard pinky nude. These lipsticks have such a cool packaging to them. They're only 7 euros and they have this really beautiful like clicky mechanism, and they just, I think they look so freaking elegant. I think Kiko always does such a great job with their packaging at the price point that they have. And I'm going to spice it up a bit by pairing the lipstick with this lip gloss from Pat McGrath. This is one of her Opulous glosses. This is in the shade Dreamscape, which is a gorgeous, I'm not really sure you're going to be able to see it, copper lime green duochrome. It's so incredibly stunning. I really love this gloss. This may be my favorite gloss from the Opulous glosses that I have from her. So let's turn you around and see what kind of look we can come up with today. So let's start off with the concealer from First Aid Beauty. Like I said, I think this is so much of a better match for my skin tone. By the way, I did apply a little bit of my MAC Strobe Cream underneath my eyes. I just always do that because I like the effect that it gives. Like, it kind of illuminates underneath my eyes, and the skin underneath my eyes can look very, very dull, especially now in the winter. So I really like the effect. I would have really liked to show you how my Glow by Auric luminizer applies, but unfortunately that still hasn't arrived, to my utter disappointment. I was so convinced that I will have already gotten the product early this week because, you know, $15 for shipping is like really expensive. And I don't really want to blame Auric for that, because what I think is going on is that my product is stuck somewhere in the Netherlands, possibly customs. So I think if I need to be mad at someone or yell at someone, it's probably customs in the Netherlands and not Auric, because according to the tracking, the product has been in the Netherlands since last Monday. I am filming this on a Saturday. It's been a fucking week. Anywho, so this is the concealer. As you can see, it's perfect for my skin tone because it just slightly lightens up my skin so that it actually brightens my under eyes. The other concealer worked okay, especially mixed in with the strobe cream from MAC, but unfortunately I think it didn't really lighten underneath my eyes, which I really like. I like the effect of a little bit of brightening underneath my eyes because it makes me look more awake. So I think the other shade is going to work really well for me in the summer when I'm a bit more tan, but I'm really happy to have this one as well. Let's apply the foundation, shall we? I'm actually very curious. It's been a really long time since I've used this foundation, at least the summer, and like I said, mixed in with other foundations. So I have forgotten how this foundation feels like on its own. I remember it being a very like liquid formula. As you can tell, oh, it's immediately starting to run down my hand, and it is very light in color. Oh god, this is still too light for me. Damn. This is what happens when you're too hasty. When you're buying expensive foundations, you guys, don't make my mistakes. Don't be too hasty. It's probably going to be okay because it's a relatively like sheer formula. But oh my goodness, it is much lighter than my skin tone. Like a shade or two. Let's see if I can make it work. Okay, now that I have blended it into my skin, I feel like because it has a more like sheer to medium coverage and a very like natural finish to it, it does actually work for me. What do you think? Please let me know. Be honest. Do you think I can pull this shade off now in the winter? Because I would be glad to go back to this foundation and get more use out of it as it is just by itself, because I really like the formula. It has a beautiful like luminous finish to it. It's not dewy, it's not like a greasy looking foundation, it's just very natural and very luminous. I just really like this foundation so much. And it costs 70 fucking euros. I don't want to have to mix it with other foundations to make it work. But you know, it's my own fault that I bought a shade that's too light. So, you tell me, does this work? I'm just quickly going to powder my face using my Mood Light Finishing Powder by Hourglass. Just a very light layer of this strategically around here. I don't really like to powder these parts of my face anymore these days. I just don't really feel the need for that. I prefer if they remain a bit more luminous. Alright, let's go into the bronzer. This is the gorgeous Butter Bronzer from Physicians Formula. Beautiful, natural finish, buildable formula, sort of a neutral color. I really love this bronzer. The bronzer is on, let's go into the gorgeous blush. This is, like I said, the shade Sweet Vision from MAC. Beautiful, beautiful finish and formula. I just love how luminous this is. Look at that. Can you see how the light is hitting it? If I wanted to, I could completely skip highlighter when I use this blush, because as I blend it out, especially towards my cheekbones, it tends to give that like golden glow. So it actually doubles as a highlighter as well. I don't even have to apply highlighter. I would just rather skip the blush and the bronzer, but go in straight into highlighter. Highlighter just happens to be one of my absolute favorite makeup products. And for highlighter, I'm taking the shade Psychedelic from Makeup Geek. What the hell is going on with Makeup Geek? They are such a snooze fest in the past years. Just nothing they've done, nothing they have attempted in order to revive the popularity of their brand has worked. They just seem tired and uninspired, and I'm just so out of love with Makeup Geek. I used to be in love with Makeup Geek. I couldn't wait for their new launch. I was always so excited when Marlena was announcing a new product launch, and now I'm like, Makeup Geek, what is going on? Does anyone else feel this way? I just don't know what's going on with them. Is Marlena, like, has Marlena stepped out of the business, or is she out of ideas, or is she tired or bored with Makeup Geek? Because it sure as fuck seems like it. Okay, you guys, I'm really happy with the base. I think it looks really beautiful, luminous, flawless. This foundation is beautiful. I had forgotten how much I like this foundation. So let's move on into the eyes. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't actually know exactly what I want to do with this palette, so let's hope this look doesn't turn out to be a hot mess. I am, however, going to start with building up my crease and dip into the shades that I normally would with this palette. I don't even know how to hold it. I think I'm going to go for a combination of this shade and this shade through my crease. This shade has a little bit of a sheen to it, but I don't really mind when it's mixed in with a matte to put it through my crease, because I don't really mind putting shades that have a bit of a sheen to them through my crease lately. Building this up into my crease, and it will give the gentlest, most romantic pink crease. Do any of you actually still own this palette? Did you get it? Did you also have to jump through hoops in order to scavenge for it in 2016, or you were never interested in it, or you were not into makeup at the time? I would be very curious to hear your sweet peach stories. Is this a palette that I still love and adore and I couldn't live without? Definitely not. But because it's such a, special memory, because I, sent my parents to Sephora. My parents, who don't give a shit about makeup, they don't know anything about it, and to them, because they had to pay for the palette, okay? I, of course, wasn't going to let my parents cover for this palette, because for Bulgarian standards, this is a relatively expensive palette. Even for normal standards, it's not a cheap palette. But they didn't comment, they didn't blink an eye when they paid however this palette cost, like 40 or 50 euros at the time, I don't remember exactly. But for like our standards, that's very expensive for eyeshadow. But they didn't make a comment, they didn't say a peep, they just went to Sephora like I had instructed them and got the palette for me. Now the next shade I'm going to use is actually a combination of this shade and this shade to blend a little bit underneath my brow bone. If you did buy this palette, did you keep it or did you already get rid of it? I have such a hard time getting rid of these like nostalgic palettes, these early 2014, 15, 16 releases that by now are not as exciting in terms of the product that they contain, but they're just such like sweet memories for me. And also, let's be honest, so many years later these eyeshadows still blend out like a dream. Okay, I think for my crease I'm going to take this shade here, which is like a plum with a little bit of a sheen to it. And I'm going to apply this into my outer corner. I don't really know what to expect out of this shade, but we're just going to find out together. Just going to build that into my crease. It's not a very exciting shade, it's one of those dark base plums, which the more you blend, the more the dark base underneath it starts to show through. But honestly, I just want a little bit of that plum sheen and something really deep in my outer corners. Let's be adventurous. Next I'm going to take this shade as well as this shade towards like the middle portion of my lid and like the inner portion and inner corner of my lid. I'm not going to spritz my brush, but I am going to apply a bit of epoxy. Taking the lighter, like bronzy brown, to apply here onto this part of my lid, just the tiniest bit in the center, and overlapping with that plum shade. Then I'm going to clean off my brush and apply this shade. What is this called? Luscious. I remember this shade being really gorgeous, like one of my favorite neutrals at the time. And it is still very beautiful. Very, very beautiful. It has a gorgeous champagne tone to it, like a warm champagne, and it has a beautiful shine to it as well. So all in all, really not a bad shade, you guys. Let's dip into the Enchanted Forest palette from Linda Hallberg, and I think I'm going to use two shades. I'm going to take the green one towards the center of my lids and this one towards the inner corner, just very lightly over top of the shade Luscious. And I'm just going to use, I think, my fingers for that. So I'm going to take the greenish reddish pink duochrome and just apply it here onto the center of the lid for a little bit of that green shine. And like I said, these are less sparkly. They have a very beautiful finish, but they're they're not really sparkly to me at all. Like you can see that it's a little bit there, but it's also very subtle, so definitely nowhere near close to Pat McGrath shades. Now I'm going to take my little brush here and take this shade, the shade Zephyr, and apply that here onto my inner corner and just lightly over top of that Luscious shade. And I feel like it's not doing anything, so I'm just going to go in with my fingers to see whether that does anything. Well, it doesn't seem to be doing much, unfortunately. I expected it to be doing a bit more. Yeah, that's the thing I remember about this palette, that for me just doesn't do as much as I was hoping for it to do. And that's one of the reasons I just never reach for it, because when I have to choose for something sparkly and beautiful, I will always reach for my Pat McGrath palettes before I reach into this palette. But I know that Bia, for instance, likes this formula because of how much more sheer and subtle it is. So perhaps the problem is that I'm just not a very subtle person. On my lower lash line, I'm actually going to just stick with the plum shade. So I'm going to take a little precise brush like this one and go into the plum shade that I have in my outer corners. And what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to work it a little bit here as an eyeliner almost, without really winging an eye, just applying it a bit more densely towards the lash line. And then using that same brush, I'm going to take this shade underneath my lower lash line right here. And then I'm going to take this shade here. Oh, I'm going to clean off my brush first, of course. And I'm going to take this shade, which is a bit of like a, I don't know, like more cool leaning pink with a bit of a sheen to it. I am going to spritz my brush with Fix Plus, because I don't want the powder to fly into my eyes, and I just want this shade to apply with a bit more punch, and just use it here to connect with the plum. It's not really going to do that much, but I think it adds a nice little finishing touch to the look. In my waterline, I'm going to stick with the plummy shades. I'm going to take this Kiko eyeshadow stick in the number 36, which is a very nice light plum with a golden sheen to it, and apply that here into my waterline. I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm a little bit disappointed with the shades from Linda, so I'm considering just wetting my brush. I'm going to take this shade here. Okay, I'm going to take the shade Ethereal, again, the green duochrome, and I'm actually going to spritz my brush because I'm just not seeing on my eyes what I want to see, which is a bit more punch. Okay, that's it. It's a little bit better. And now going in with the Kiko lipstick. The formula is gorgeous. It has a little bit of a slip to it. It's comfortable and creamy without looking overly creamy if you're not into that kind of formula. I had forgotten what a gorgeous formula this lipstick has. I'm going to take the Pat McGrath Opulence Gloss. I'm going to apply the tiniest bit on the back of my hand, like this. Overall, a bit of a softer look, but you know what? Nothing wrong with that. Now, when it comes to the products that I had used, I think the only two products that I'm a little bit more meh about are the two eyeshadow palettes. Can I not live without the Sweet Peach palette from Too Faced? I probably could. There's nothing in this palette that is outstanding in terms of formula, color or finish in this day and age, but of course let's not forget this is a palette from 2016 and I've had it since 2016. And it still smells like peaches, by the way. If there's something this palette never fails to do is smell like peaches. But like I said, could I not live without it? I probably could. I will, however, continue to use this palette because I think that the mattes in here are still very beautiful and they blend very beautifully. I will keep it because I think there are some useful shades in here, and I've said it many times, I don't like to be wasteful. And I cannot think of anyone to whom I can pass on this palette who will really enjoy it. When it comes to the Linda Hallberg Enchanted Secret Squad, I remain disappointed for the same reason that I was disappointed with it several years ago. I just don't feel like it does that much for the price. I mean, it's pretty. I think they are very beautiful. Don't get me wrong, it's beautiful, and if it is your thing to be a little bit more subtle with these sort of finishes, the formula is outstanding. But to me, the packaging is a real deal breaker. It's just so, like, cheap drugstore packaging makes better cardboard packaging than this. This is literally just like, what can we throw the 4 pans of eyeshadows into so that they're housed into something that passes off as a palette? And like I said, to me these are just not sparkly enough. I think depending on your taste you might love or hate these, but personally I will always choose my VR shades from Pat McGrath over these. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and the look that we created. Let me know if you have any of these products and what are your feelings about them. Do you still have them? Do you use them? Are they still something you enjoy, or are you still on the verge of decluttering them? So, without further rambling, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you would like to see more of my face. If you don't, then fucking don't. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!